This is Mac OS Ken.
A stellar first quarter for Apple's App Store. Apple may Sherlock your password manager. And the Mac Observer Show is a go. It is Friday, the 7th of June, 2024. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from Mac OS Ken. Brought to you by yours truly and sponsored by Pen Chalet, selling exquisite fountain pens for over 10 years with special offers for Mac OS Ken listeners at penchalet.com/macosken. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macosken. What's happening in Apple's App Store in Europe is apparently happening the world over. I told you earlier this week of new numbers from Evercore analyst Amit Daryanani that had revenue for Apple's App Store in the EU up 25% last month versus the same month a year earlier. While his note centered on the App Store's revenue increase in the wake of Apple's Digital Markets Act compliance, I wondered what it was that was driving that increase. Turns out it's happening everywhere. Apple Insider has new first quarter numbers from Sensor Tower's Digital Market Index report. Covering both Apple's App Store and the Google Play Store, the report says spending on apps is up globally, rising 9.5% year on year. As it tends to do, most of the revenue and revenue growth went to Apple. On a platform-specific basis, says the piece, iOS continued to rake in the most revenue overall with a total of $24.6 billion in transactions for the quarter, up 11.5% year on year. By comparison, the Google Play Store saw overall revenue grow to $11.2 billion, up 5.3%. As also tends to be the way, Google Play had many more downloads than the App Store, though its downloads were actually down. By Sensor Tower's estimate, the App Store saw downloads of 8.4 billion, up 2.1% year on year. That was the App Store's best quarter since the second quarter of 2020, according to Sensor Tower. Meanwhile, the Google Play Store saw 25.6 billion downloads in the first quarter, about 3 times the number in the App Store. Huge, but slightly smaller. Google Play downloads were down 5.2% year on year, according to the report. Who stands to be Sherlock this year at WWDC? The latest from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman puts LastPass and 1Password on the block. In case you don't know, the Urban Dictionary says Sherlocking is when you develop a product only to have Apple come along and provide exactly the same functionality in a system update. It happened to Corellia Software twice, once with Sherlock and again with iWeb. Ask my friend August Trometer about Sherlocking sometime. Really unfun. Anyway, a piece from Engadget highlights Gurman's latest. According to that, Apple is planning to make a standalone password management app. While Apple already does that through iCloud Keychain, the fact that users have to hunt up stored passwords and settings makes it not overly user-friendly. The way Engadget sees it, having a dedicated app for passwords built into Apple devices would not only make this easier, but also give people one more reason to stay in the Apple ecosystem. The app will simply be called Passwords, according to Gurman. He expects the application to be announced during Monday's WWDC keynote. Kind of a weird story this week about Apple and security and older devices. Mac Rumors has word of Apple's latest compliance with government regulations. This time it's the UK's Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Regulation. Under these, the piece says companies are required to say how long they will offer security updates for internet-capable products to be sold in the UK. Push to it, the piece says Apple has submitted a public regulatory filing for the iPhone 15 Pro Max. According to that filing, Apple will offer security updates for its current top-of-the-line phone for 5 years from its date of release. The thing is, there are two things. Thing one looks bad for Apple. As Mac Rumors points out, both Samsung and Google guarantee 7 years of security updates, as well as Android OS updates for their devices, which is 2 years longer than Apple's guarantee. Thing 2, though, looks good for Apple. While it's only guaranteeing 5 years of security updates, company usually goes much longer. For example, the piece points out, just this March, Apple pushed a security update to iPhone 6s models, which launched in September of 2015, or 9 years ago. They did something similar in late 2020 for an iPhone model that was 7 years old, according to the piece. So the guarantee looks bad. The track record looks better. Another story of Apple support, this one kind of a drag. According to a piece from Cult of Mac, Apple's standard 1-year warranty does not cover physical damage on devices. However, in the US, the company previously made an exception for repairing a hairline display crack on an iPhone or Apple Watch, provided there was no other damage to the device. You caught that previously part though, right? Going forward, says the Cult, the company will no longer cover a single hairline crack under its warranty. You'll either have to pay for the repair or claim accidental damage under Apple Care, according to the report. That puts that price at $29 under Apple Care Plus. Without that coverage, the price can run from $199 to $329, depending on the device in question. If you're looking for good news, the Cult says hairline display crack repairs for iPads and Macs are not affected by this change. More news in a moment, but first a word from today's sponsor, Pen Chalet. Remember that 100-year-old fountain pen I told you about earlier this week? My special lady friend tried to hand it to her dad yesterday to let him try it out. It's not fair to say that he freaked out, but he wasn't far from that. He's just not comfortable with fountain pens. Maybe you're the same way. I know I was. That's why I worked with Pen Chalet to put together the starter boxes at penchalet.com/macOScan. Whether you go with the Pilot Metropolitan or the Lamy Safari, what you'll get is a good pen that's also good for beginners, plus paper and ink that are great for starting out. Exploring on your own is wonderful, but some choices can make the journey more difficult. The starter boxes at penchalet.com/macOScan are just that, great places to start. Now, if you're already a fountain pen fan, you can use code MOK10 for 10% off purchases besides the starter boxes. That's pens, inks, carrying cases, inkwells, all kinds of accessories. A good pen and the right ink really elevate my writing experience. See what they can do for you. Head to penchalet.com/macOScan. Check out the discounted starter boxes or use code MOK10 for 10% off purchases besides the starter box. Whether for you or someone else, fountain pens make amazing gifts. See what is waiting at penchalet.com/macOScan. And a big thanks to Pen Chalet for sponsoring today's show. And early congratulations to this year's Apple Design Award winners. While they're usually announced during WWDC, a piece from Mac Rumors says Apple has jumped the gun and announced the 2024 winners ahead of the developer event. 14 winners in total. That's one app and one game for each of this year's 7 categories. You can find the list of winners on Apple's site at apple.com/newsroom. And finally today, word on the street has Apple retail pulling into the Motor City. Apple Insider says work may be underway on the first Apple store for Detroit, Michigan. While the city is already home to one of Apple's Developer Academy programs, its nearest Apple store is about 20 miles away. Now, a local news report says that may be changing. According to the Detroit Free Press, according to Apple Insider, two unnamed local people say that construction workers have told them that they are working on an Apple store. There is retail construction work underway behind three covered-up storefronts between 1426 and 1434 Woodward. Nothing official on this from Apple. Meanwhile, workers at the construction site seem to have gone quiet. They are now referring all queries to a local real estate firm, according to the report. That is going to do it for a relatively short show for today, though I do have others for you to check out. First, everything I told you last week about the Mac Observer show is true, except for the part where it was starting last week. In case you've missed it, the Mac Observer show is a new show I'm hosting, looking at a range of topics with a range of guests. Silicon Valley insiders, experts in various parts of Apple's business, people knowledgeable in other parts of tech. Guest number 1 on episode number 1 is Creative Strategy CEO Ben Bajarin. He's got thoughts on foldable iPhones, why Apple crashed the car, Apple Vision Pro, expectations for Apple and AI, and a whole lot more. Episode 1 is up now. Today, and every Friday from now on, you can hear the show and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Search for Mac Observer or Ken Ray to find it. You can also listen at macobserver.com, and you can see the show on the Mac Observer's YouTube channel, youtube.com/MacObserver. Give it a look or a listen, and let us know what you think. And thanks. The other show is so annoying. Not the show, but the topic. This week on Checklist 378, we tackle a probable Ticketmaster data breach. Yes, if you have been to a concert, there's a chance your data is for sale on the dark web. We'll tell you more on Checklist 378, brought to you by SecureMac. Find it later today, wherever you get podcasts. macOS Ken, brought to you by me, and sponsored by Pen Chalet, selling exquisite fountain pens for over 10 years, with special offers for macOS Ken listeners at penchalet.com/macOSKen. This show is also supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. Info at macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.